Good evening, guys. Hi, I hope everyone is well and enjoying the UK summer at the moment, albeit with no sun, just sort of varying degrees of kind of rain and thunder and the odd bit of sun when it decides to put in an appearance. But yeah, anyway, enough about the weather. Yeah, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. Some of you may be aware that I'm quite a fan of Brazilian music. It's one of these genres that, particularly Tropicalia, that I've been aware of for many years, but have struggled to track albums down, so much so that I had to wait many years for them to be reissued, and you can actually pick a lot of them up now fairly cheaply online, because a lot of them are classics of the genre, and they're on major labels like Philips and so on, and they get reissued for relatively inexpensively, which is a novelty these days. So yeah, but what I thought I'd do is, I don't want to make this video particularly long. I'm just going to run through a sort of cross section of my collection and sort of highlight some of these artists. Okay, so obviously at its heart, a lot of Brazilian music is kind of the samba and Latin rhythms and so on. But obviously, when it came to into the 60s, you had artists that were sort of starting to sort of subvert their national music and wanting to bring in new elements from contemporary artists from the UK and from America. One of the earliest ones was this artist called Elise Regina. And this is her album Elise from 1966. This is actually a reissue. I did have an original of this, but it was a bit crackly and so on. So I actually traded it in and got a reissue. And this sounds fantastic. Again on the Philips label. So yeah, she's a kind of singer that was kind of steeped very heavily in jazz. This is a great album. There's some of the Brazilian sort of Tropicalia luminaries writing songs on here, like. Milton Nascimento, and we've also got sort of Katana Veloso and Gilberto, amongst others. And this is a lovely listen. She's got some fantastic energy in her vocal performances. Fantastic, this wonderful production on this really leaps out of the speakers. But yeah, I mean, she I think she had a recording history of about 20 years. I think she started about 1960-61. She sadly passed away in 1982. But by that stage, she'd made about, I think, 20 studio albums. So yeah, this is definitely one of her more celebrated albums, but I'm always intending to pick up more. So that's Elise. And of course, the Tropicalia movement itself was an art movement that was made up of sort of music, art, film, theatre and poetry, that started in was kind of created and began in the late 60s in Brazil itself, but the Bahia region of Brazil, near Sao Paulo. And it was kind of at odds with the government at the time, which was a sort of hard left-wing sort of military dictatorship, and the sort of free-spirited nature of the Tropicalists, or Tropicalismo, as the music is sometimes referred to, was definitely at odds. And some of the artists that started it, like Katana Veloso and I think Gilberto Gil, I think they were in prison for a while for, because they were just seen as kind of subverters to the status quo. And I think the authorities definitely were sort of scared of this movement of freedom of expression and so on. But of course, that's what makes the music so wonderful, because it's extremely free. It's a free art form, and it was very experimental. So yeah, obviously the one that kind of, I guess, started it all, arguably, is this one. So this is Katana Veloso, and this is his debut album from 1967. I think I saw Steve Carlson recently, or a little while back, pick up a copy of this, of an original from a shop he was lucky enough to find. These early Tropicalia albums are incredibly difficult to get hold of, but fortunately they have been reissued, and this is a great copy. It comes with a CD as well, so you get the kind of the vinyl album, vinyl experience, and a digital copy, CD to as well. So if you don't want to wear out your vinyl, you can just record it. I've got a mini disc recorder, so I just make a copy from the CD onto, or the record onto mini disc, and then I've got another copy that I usually play as a, just have them out in the garden, or it's a nice evening. I'll often go out with a beer or a drink, cup of tea or something, and just chill out with that. So yeah, but very, very good place to start with Tropicalia if you want to, if you're interested in getting into the genre, because this was the guy, just genius songwriter, just kind of just took those kind of the traditional kind of Brazilian rhythms and sort of and feel, and just mashed it with a kind of UK US psychedelia at the time, as a sort of Beatles West Coast sort of elements in there as well, sort of tape effects and so on, and it's a wonderful listen. Yeah. Okay, another of the Tropicalia artists from that was sort of in the Katana camp was this lady. This is Gal Costa, and this is her debut from 1969. There's Katana Veloso's fingerprints all over this. I think he writes probably a good 50-60% of this album. Gal Costa just puts her own just beautiful vocal and spin on his songs, and there's some real kind of transcendent psychedelic elements on this. Very, very varied in kind of tempo, some beautiful ballads, particularly Baby is wonderful. Sebastiana is wonderful as well. And just some really kind of left field elements, but just fantastic instrumentation and musicality and musicianship on these records. Just, I think that's the beauty of the Tropicalia music. It's just very, very free, and would highly recommend getting them. I think this one's out of print at the moment, That's her second, I think, a follow-up album, which I really like to get as well. But again, out of print. This is a Japanese copy I was lucky to snag at a really good price, and it sounds fantastic. If you can get a copy of this, go for it, because it's wonderful. Okay, and then probably even more out there with the kind of psychedelic movement with these guys. This is a group from Sao Paulo. This is Os Mutantes. This is a copy I picked up quite recently. So this was a kind of their really real psychedelic sort of band of the Tropicalia movement, just who really just absolutely just mixed everything up, backwards sort of tape, loops, effects, just really sort of fuzz guitars that obviously that are sort of all over the Tropicalia, you know, and the psychedelic music of the time. And yeah, fronted by the wonderful Rita Lee, who obviously we sadly lost quite recently. And this band were in existence, I think, from 1966 to 78. There's several, they recorded about 5 or 6 albums. Most of them, I think, have been reissued. This is in the same series as the Katana Veloso album. So again, you get the vinyl reproduction of the original vinyl, and also a CD copy. So that's fantastic. And that's Os Mutantes. Again, this has a cover as well of Baby by Katana Veloso. I think a lot of the Tropicalia artists at the time were recording that. Okay, and then another one that was really mixing it up. This is another one I picked up recently. This is Rubinio Morrow, Assumpção. This is fantastic. This is definitely one of my favorites. This is, I think, 1972, so a little bit later, sort of in the movement itself. But these are two duo, just fantastic band, just really mixing everything up again. But obviously with a probably even better production, because it's slightly later than the Os Mutantes. Yeah, just really beautiful playing, fantastic vocals, great harmonies and so on. And this is, I think this one's probably still available as well. It's a Mr. Bongo release, or reissue, I should say. Okay, another one from the movement was George Ben, and this is Brazil Tropical. I'm not sure whether this is a compilation or not. It's on a Brazilian label. I think it's an original copy from the 70s. It looks like it's got a, I don't know, the code number there. But yeah, so George Ben, another one, just real groundbreaking artists like Katana Veloso, who came up at the same time in the kind of mid-late 60s period. Famously did an album called Brazil Africa in 1976, with just fantastic rhythms and so on that were kind of picked up by artists like Rod Stewart for like Do You Think I'm Sexy, and just lifted whole vocal lines and so on. And I wouldn't have had a clue until a few years ago that it wasn't all Rod, you know, or where the influence came from. But yeah, certainly on the kind of the sort of disco period and that kind of dance music of the mid to late 70s, you can definitely hear George Ben in that. This is a wonderful album. As I say, I think it's a compilation, but on the two sides, all the tracks just segue. It's just like almost like a complete performance where they're just playing. The energy is just absolutely phenomenal. This is definitely a highlight for me. I've played this album to death, particularly in the summer. You can just turn it up and just open the windows, let the sun come in, and just bask in the tropical. It's wonderful, really upbeat, positive vibe, fantastic stuff. That's George Ben. Okay. The next few I'm going to play, not necessarily Tropicalia, but certainly big Brazilian jazz singer, of course, who famously started in the early 60s, did an album with Stan Getz. This is Astra Gilberto, and this is one of my favourite albums of hers. This is September 17, 1969. So yeah, Astra Gilberto, one of the sort of early singers, came through her husband when playing on an album. Stan Getz, I say, she did the Girl from Ipanema vocals, and her husband couldn't speak English, so she came up and recorded it, and the rest was history, of course. This is her final album of the 60s, and this is a belting album. I love this record. Fantastic covers on here, particularly the first side, Beginnings, which is off the first Chicago album. She does an absolutely incendiary version of that. Just great energy. Just 8 minutes of bliss. Holiday, version of the Beatles, Here, There and Everywhere. You've got Doors cover, Light My Fire. Yeah, wonderful vocalist. Another one, Brazilian artist, highly recommended. Composer, producer. This is an absolute stone cold classic from 1972. Another one I hadn't heard until a few years ago. This is Arthur Veraca, and up until I think the early 2000s, this was his one and only studio album from 1972. This is just sublime, absolutely sublime. Just fantastic level of musicianship on this is just on another level. Beautiful transcendent songs, vocals. I believe that he's now a producer, but just doesn't. But he has actually produced some of his own records under his own name, but they're sort of few and far between. As I say, this up until the early 2000s, this was his only studio album. But yeah, again, this is one that you can pick up fairly cheaply online. Reissue. I think originals are pretty difficult and expensive to get hold of. But yeah, that's Arthur Veraca. And the one really that started me off that I heard years ago, this is a definitely, if you want to just get a good compilation of just a real variety of different Brazilian artists, particularly the Tropicalia artists, this is a really good comp to start with. I first heard this back in the early 90s, and it was just, I just absolutely loved it. So this is a compilation by David Byrne. This is called Bellezza Tropical. So Brazil Classics 1. So I think he did another one, but it wasn't Tropicalia. It was sort of more sort of samba music and so on. Nowhere near as good as this. Yeah, this came out in, I think, 1989. Found this in a charity shop in a load of records that were right at the back behind a curtain. Yeah, and looking through a load of usual rubbish and just came across this and couldn't believe it. But I'm sure it's not probably a terribly rare record. I'm sure you could pick this up. But yeah, I mean, David Byrne apparently got really influenced by the sort of Tropicalia artists, as did Beck after him in the 90s. And yeah, he put this compilation together, and it's just fantastic. So you got George Ben, Gilberto Gil, Katana Veloso. He turns up, he's probably about 4 or 5 songs. The final track, Terra, was just him and a 12-string guitar. Is just unbelievably good. Yeah, Milton Nascimento. You've got Gal Costa as well. Yeah, just fantastic compilation. Highly recommended. Okay, so that was just really just to give you a bit of a run through, a bit of sort of context of Tropicalia, and just some of these albums. As I say, majority of them are reissues, and they're pretty easy to get hold of. You shouldn't have a problem. Yeah, if you can find the originals, even better. But yeah, it's a genre that's well worth diving into if you're not already a fan. So yeah, cheers if you've stuck with me for that, guys. And yeah, have a great weekend, and I'll hopefully have another video soon. Cheers, take care, bye bye.